Commander Unji stood at the huge window of Nexus Station and looked out at the stars. Behind her, the busy sounds of the station continued. People from many different worlds walked by, talking in languages she could not understand. But Unji was not paying attention to any of this. She was thinking about ships. For 12 years, Unji had been the best ship inspector in the galaxy. Every government, every military, every trading company wanted her to check their ships. They all said the same thing. Commander Unji will tell us if our ship is good enough. And most of the time, her answer was no. She had looked at 307 ships. Big ships, small ships, fast ships, strong ships, ships that could carry 1,000 people, ships that could fight whole fleets, ships so beautiful they looked like they were made from starlight itself. But none of them were perfect. None of them met her standards. Unji turned away from the window. Her small office was filled with reports. Thick files sat on every surface. Each file was about a different ship from a different world. Each file ended the same way. Does not meet requirements for full approval. The Vorthak ships were fast, very fast. They could cross half the galaxy in just a few weeks, but their hulls were too thin. One good hit from an asteroid and the whole ship would break apart. The Vorthak engineers always said the same thing. Speed is more important than armor. We can avoid danger if we are fast enough. Unji did not believe this. Space was full of things you could not avoid, no matter how fast you were. The Keldon ships were the opposite. They were huge and strong. Their armor was so thick that plasma cannons could barely scratch it. But they were slow and clumsy. It took them forever to change direction, and their engines used so much fuel that they could barely make long trips. The Keldon captains always bragged about their thick armor. Nothing can hurt us, they would say. But Unji knew that being strong was useless if you could not move when you needed to. The Thessian ships were the most beautiful things Unji had ever seen. They looked like works of art floating through space. Every curve was perfect. Every surface was polished until it shined like a mirror. The Thessians spent years making each ship, but beauty meant nothing if the ship could not do its job. The Thessian ships were designed to look good, not to work well. Their weapons were too small because bigger guns would ruin the pretty lines. Their cargo holds were too small because storage rooms were ugly. Form over function, Unji always wrote in her reports. The door to her office made a soft sound. Unji looked up to see Jiho walking in. He was her assistant, a young man from Earth. Jiho was always polite and always worked hard. But sometimes Unji thought he was too soft. He seemed to think every ship had something good about it. Commander, Jiho said, holding a tablet in his hands. I have the schedule for next week. Let me guess, Unji said without looking up from her desk. More disappointments. Jiho looked uncomfortable. Well, there are several requests. The Zephyrian Trade Guild wants you to inspect their new cargo haulers. The Crimson Fleet has a prototype warship they think might interest you. And there is one more. What is it? A human ship, Commander. They sent a formal request yesterday. Unji finally looked up. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Galactic Federation 20 years ago. Most of the older species still thought of them as children playing with toys they did not understand. Humans, she said. What could they possibly have that would interest me? The ship is called the Soul's Pride, Jiho said, reading from his tablet. The captain says it is their finest vessel. Unji almost laughed. Every captain said their ship was the finest. Every engineer claimed their design was perfect. Every admiral bragged that their fleet was unbeatable. She had heard it all before. What type of ship is it? Mixed purpose, according to the files. It can fight, it can explore, it can carry cargo. The captain is someone named Dongwu. A ship that tried to do everything was usually a ship that did nothing well. Unji had seen dozens of these mixed-purpose vessels. They were always compromises. Not quite fast enough to be good scouts. Not quite strong enough to be good fighters. Not quite big enough to carry much cargo. Jack of all trades, master of none. Why do they want an inspection? Unji asked. They want to apply for a Class A certification. Full galactic operating license. That was ambitious. Class A certification was the highest level. It meant a ship could go anywhere in the galaxy. It could enter any system, dock at any station, trade with any species. Most ships never got Class A certification. It required perfect scores in safety, reliability, combat readiness, and crew efficiency. Unji looked back at the files on her desk. So many ships, so many failures. She was starting to wonder if any ship would ever meet her standards. Maybe she was asking for too much. Maybe perfection was impossible. But then she thought about the lives that depended on these ships. Families traveling to new homes, scientists exploring dangerous regions of space, soldiers fighting to protect innocent people. If a ship failed, people died. It was that simple. Her high standards were not about being difficult. They were about keeping people alive. "Schedule the inspection," she said finally, "but put it at the end of the week." After we finish with the others, Ji-ho nodded and made a note on his tablet. "Should I tell them anything special about the inspection process?" "Tell them the same thing I tell everyone. I will inspect every system on their ship. I will test every piece of equipment. I will interview every crew member, and I will find every weakness, every shortcut, every flaw. If their ship is truly the finest vessel they have nothing to worry about." But Yoonji did not believe their ship would be any different from the others. Humans were brave, she had heard. They were clever and determined. But bravery did not make a ship's hull stronger. Cleverness did not make an engine more efficient. Determination did not make weapons more accurate. After Ji-ho left, Yoonji went back to her reports. She picked up the file for a Draknari battlecruiser she had inspected last month. On paper, it looked perfect. Fast engines, strong armor, powerful weapons. But when she had tested the life support system, she found that it could fail if the ship turned too quickly. The Draknari engineers had not thought about how the artificial gravity would affect the air recycling system. One sharp turn in battle and the whole crew could suffocate. Details like that were why her inspections took so long. Anyone could look at the big systems. Engines, weapons, shields. But the small things were what killed people. The backup systems that were not really backups. The safety protocols that only worked in perfect conditions. The emergency procedures that no one had actually practiced. Yoonji put down the file and looked out her window again. Somewhere out there, a human ship was flying toward Nexus Station. In a few days, she would walk through its corridors, check its systems, and talk to its crew. And most likely, she would add another file to her collection. Another ship that was almost good enough, but not quite. She hoped she was wrong. She hoped the humans would surprise her. But hope was not something Commander Yoonji allowed herself very often. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you careless. Hope made you miss the small details that could kill people. Still, as she watched the stars, a small part of her wondered what the soul's pride would be like. The soul's pride looked ordinary. Yoonji stood in the docking bay and studied the human ship through the transparent aluminum barrier. It was not beautiful like the Thessian vessels. It was not huge like the Keldon warships. It was not sleek like the Vorthak racers. It looked like someone had built it to do a job, not to impress anyone. The hull was gray metal with simple lines. There were no decorations, no fancy curves, no shining surfaces. Work lights were mounted on the outside in practical places. The docking ports were standard Federation design. Everything about the ship said functional and nothing more. Ji-ho stood beside her reading from his tablet. The ship is 150 meters long. Crew of 42. Mixed purpose design, as we discussed. It has been in service for 3 years. What about the captain? Dongwoo, age 41, 20 years of space experience. He started as an engineer, worked his way up to command. No major incidents on his record, Yoonji nodded. At least the captain had real experience. Too many ships were commanded by people who looked good in uniform, but had never actually fixed a broken engine or patched a hull breach. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. A man walked out to greet them. He was not tall, but he moved with confidence. His uniform was clean but not fancy. His hands showed the calluses of someone who had done real work. "Commander Yoonji," he said with a slight bow. "I am Captain Dongwoo. Welcome to the Soul's Pride." His voice was calm and respectful, not nervous like some captains when they knew they were being inspected. Not arrogant like others who thought their ships were perfect. "Just professional," Captain Yoonji replied. "I trust you understand what this inspection involves." "Yes, Commander. We are ready for your complete evaluation. My crew has prepared all the documentation you requested. All systems are available for testing." They walked through the airlock into the ship. The corridors were narrow but clean. The walls were painted a simple white with safety markings in bright colors. Emergency equipment was mounted in clear sight every 20 meters. The floors had a non-slip coating that looked worn but well-maintained. "Your ship seems very practical," Yoonji said as they walked. "We built it to work, not to look good," Dongwoo replied. "Every space has a purpose. Every system has been tested. The first stop was the bridge. It was smaller than most ships Yunji had inspected. The walls were covered with displays and control panels. Everything looked functional but cramped. The captain's chair was just a simple seat with basic controls. "This is Navigation Officer Subin," Dongwu said, indicating a young woman at one of the stations. "She has been plotting our course corrections." Subin looked up from her work. "Commander, all navigation logs are ready for your review." Yunji looked at the navigation station. The displays showed current position, course calculations, and sensor readings. But she noticed something unusual. There were backup instruments mounted next to each main display. Manual calculation tools, even an old-style star chart. "Why do you have manual navigation equipment?" she asked. "Because computers fail," Subin said simply. "If our main navigation system goes down, we need to be able to find our way home." Most ships relied completely on their computer systems. If the computers failed, the crew would be helpless. But these humans had prepared for that possibility. The next stop was the engine room. Chief Engineer HFY was waiting for them. She was a small woman with grease stains on her coveralls and tools hanging from her belt. She looked like she spent most of her time actually working on the engines, not sitting at a desk. "All engines are running at normal efficiency," she reported. "I have the maintenance logs ready for review." Yunji looked around the engine room. It was clean and organized, but not fancy. The engines themselves were standard Federation design, nothing special. But everything was perfectly maintained. Every surface was clean. Every tool was in its proper place. Every gauge and display was clearly visible. "How often do you perform maintenance?" Yunji asked. "Daily inspections," HFY replied. "Weekly deep checks. Monthly complete overhauls. We do not wait for problems to show up. But these engines are rated for 6 months between major maintenance cycles." HFY smiled. "The engines might be able to go 6 months. But space does not care what the manual says. We check everything every day because we want to go home every day." This was unusual. Most crews did the minimum required maintenance. They trusted their equipment to work as designed. But these humans seemed to assume their equipment would fail unless they constantly watched it. In the medical bay, Dr. Young-Soo was organizing supply cabinets. Everything was already perfectly neat, but he was checking every item anyway. "Medical supplies are fully stocked," he reported. "All equipment has been tested and calibrated." Yunji looked at the medical bay. It was well equipped for a ship this size. But again, she noticed backup systems everywhere. Manual surgical tools next to automated ones, chemical tests next to electronic scanners, supplies for injuries and sicknesses that were very unlikely to happen. "Why do you carry treatment supplies for Altarian fever?" she asked. "Humans cannot catch Altarian fever. But our passengers might be Altarians," Young-Soo said. "A good doctor prepares for every possibility." The cargo bay was next. It was efficiently organized with secure storage units and easy access to everything. But Pilot Minho was there checking cargo restraints that had already been checked twice. "All cargo is secure," he reported. "Weight distribution is optimal for maneuvering." Minho was older than the others. Yunji could see scars on his hands and face, probably from combat experience. "You check the cargo restraints often?" she asked. "Before every jump, after every jump, and once during long flights," he said. "Loose cargo can shift during sudden maneuvers. Shifted cargo can make a ship impossible to control." "Have you had problems with cargo shifting?" "Once," Minho said quietly. "Long time ago. Different ship. We almost died because someone did not check the restraints properly. I do not make that mistake twice." As the tour continued, Yunji noticed a pattern. Every crew member was doing extra work. Work that was not required but that made the ship safer. They were not just meeting the minimum standards. They were exceeding them in every way possible, but why? What made these humans so careful, so prepared, so willing to do extra work that other species considered unnecessary? "Captain," she said as they finished the initial tour, "your crew seems very thorough." "We have learned to be careful," Dongwu replied. "Space is dangerous. Ships fail. Equipment breaks. Computers make mistakes. If we want to survive, we must be ready for anything. But your technology is good. Your ship is well built. Why do you assume everything will fail?" Dongwu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because we are human, Commander. We know that anything made by people can be broken by people, or by space, or by bad luck. Hope is not a survival strategy." That evening, Unji sat in her temporary quarters aboard the Soul's Pride. She reviewed her notes from the day's inspection. Everything she had seen was technically adequate. The ship met all the basic requirements for safety and functionality. But there was something more. Something she had never seen before in all her inspections. The humans did not just build a ship that worked. They built a ship that would keep working even when things went wrong. They planned for failure. They prepared for disaster. They assumed the worst and made sure they could handle it. It was almost like they did not trust the universe to be kind to them. Yunji looked out the small porthole at the stars. Tomorrow she would continue her inspection. She would test the ship's systems under stress. She would see how the crew handled emergencies. She would find out if this human approach to engineering was just paranoia, or if it was something more. For the first time in years, she was genuinely curious about what she would discover. The mess hall of the Soul's Pride was not impressive. The tables were simple metal. The chairs were basic and functional. The walls were painted the same practical white as the rest of the ship. But when Unji entered for dinner, she found something unexpected. The entire crew was there, and they were all talking and laughing like a family. On most ships, the crew ate in shifts. Officers ate with officers. Engineers ate with engineers. Everyone stayed in their own groups. But here, the captain sat next to a maintenance worker. The chief medical officer was sharing a table with junior pilots. Everyone seemed comfortable with everyone else. "Commander," Captain Dongwu called out, "please join us. We saved you a seat." Yunji sat down at the main table. The food was simple but good. Real food, not the processed meals that most ships served. Someone had actually cooked this. "Who prepared this meal?" she asked. "We all take turns," said Chief Engineer Haewon. "Everyone on the ship has cooking duty once a week. Even the captain." "Even me," Dongwu admitted with a smile. "Though my cooking is not as good as everyone else's." "The captain makes excellent soup," said Dr. Youngsu. "But his attempts at bread are dangerous." The crew laughed. Even Dongwu laughed at himself. Yunji was surprised. On most ships, no one would dare make jokes about the captain. Military discipline was strict. But these humans seemed to have a different kind of discipline. One based on respect rather than fear. "Commander," said Navigation Officer Subin, "we heard you have inspected many ships. What makes a ship truly excellent?" It was an interesting question. Yunji thought for a moment before answering. Reliability, the ability to perform under any conditions. Safety for the crew, efficiency in all operations. "Then you understand what we are trying to do here," Dongwu said. "We want to build ships that our families can trust. Ships that will bring our people home safely. But your technology is not the most advanced," Yunji pointed out. "Your ship is not the fastest or the strongest or the most beautiful." "No," agreed Chief Engineer Haewon. "But it is dependable. Every bolt on this ship has been checked twice. Every system has a backup. Every backup has a backup. Not because our technology is bad, but because we know that space does not care how advanced your computer is when it fails." Pilot Minho nodded. His scarred face was serious. "I have seen beautiful ships become beautiful coffins because someone trusted their technology too much. I have seen fast ships become slow debris because someone did not check their engines carefully enough." "What happened to you?" Yunji asked, noticing how the other crew members looked at Minho with respect. Minho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 7 years ago I was pilot on a Dreknari merchant ship. Beautiful vessel. Advanced everything. The captain was proud of how little maintenance we needed to do. He said our technology was so good that constant checking was unnecessary. He paused to take a drink. We were carrying medical supplies to a colony world. Families with sick children were waiting for us. We were in hyperspace when the main computer failed. No warning. No gradual breakdown. One moment everything was fine. The next moment we were flying blind. What did you do? The Dreknari crew panicked. They had never learned to fly without computers. They had never practiced manual navigation. They just stood around waiting for someone to fix the computer. But the computer could not be fixed. The damage was too extensive. Minho looked directly at Yunji. I had to take control of the ship. I had to drop us out of hyperspace manually. I had to navigate using old methods that most pilots no longer learn. We barely made it to the colony. The Dreknari crew called me a hero, but I was not a hero. I was just someone who had learned to prepare for failure. Is that when you joined the human fleet? Yes, because I realized that humans understand something that other species have forgotten. Technology is wonderful when it works, but when it fails, you need people who know what to do next. Dr. Young-Soo leaned forward. We have a saying among human engineers. Trust your equipment, but verify everything. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst? Another saying, added Hae-won with a grin. There are two types of pilots. Those who have had equipment failure, and those who will have equipment failure. The crew laughed again. But Yoonji could see that behind the humor was real understanding. These people had thought deeply about failure. They had prepared for it. They expected it. But this approach must be expensive, Yoonji said. All the extra maintenance, all the backup systems, all the additional training. It must cost much more than the standard methods. Captain Dongwoo nodded. Yes, it costs more. More time, more money, more effort. But losing a ship costs even more. Losing crew members costs everything. Other species seem to manage with less intensive methods. Other species accept higher loss rates, Minho said bluntly. They build many ships knowing that some will be lost. We prefer to build fewer ships that we know will survive. It is a different philosophy, Dongwoo explained. Many species try to achieve perfection through advancement. Better computers, stronger materials, more sophisticated systems. We try to achieve reliability through preparation. Better training, more redundancy, deeper understanding. Subin looked thoughtful. My grandmother used to tell me a story. Two farmers were preparing for winter. One farmer bought the most advanced heating system available. Very expensive, very sophisticated. The other farmer bought a simple heater, but he also bought extra fuel, backup parts, and learned how to repair everything himself. Let me guess, Yoonji said. When winter came, the advanced system failed. Exactly. The first farmer froze because he had trusted his technology completely. The second farmer stayed warm because he had prepared for problems. That is the human way, Dr. Young-Soo added. We assume our technology will fail at the worst possible moment. So we prepare for that moment. But do you not trust your own engineering? Hae-won asked. We trust our engineering, Hae-won said firmly. But we do not trust the universe to be gentle with our engineering. Asteroids do not care how well designed your hull is. Solar flares do not care how advanced your electronics are. Pirates do not care how beautiful your ship looks. The conversation continued late into the evening. Yoonji found herself genuinely interested in these humans and their approach to space travel. They were not fatalistic or pessimistic. They were realistic. They understood that space was dangerous and that equipment could fail. So they prepared for those realities. As the crew began to clean up after dinner, Yoonji noticed something else. Everyone helped. The captain carried dishes to the cleaning station. The chief engineer wiped down tables. The senior officers worked alongside junior crew members. There was no sense that some jobs were beneath certain people. Why does everyone help with cleanup? She asked Dongwoo. Because it is our ship, he replied simply. All of ours. We all live here. We all depend on each other. Why would we not all take care of it? Later, in her quarters, Eunji reviewed her notes from the day. She had learned more about the humans and their philosophy. But she still needed to see how their approach worked under pressure. Tomorrow, she would begin stress testing their systems. She would simulate emergencies and see how the crew responded. She suspected the results would be interesting, but as she prepared for sleep, one thought kept returning to her mind. These humans did not seem to fear failure. They expected it, prepared for it, and planned to overcome it. That was very different from every other species she had encountered. Most species built their ships and trained their crews to avoid problems. The humans built their ships and trained their crews to solve problems that had not happened yet. It was a subtle difference, but Yoonji was beginning to think it might be a very important one. Yoonji woke to the sound of emergency alarms. The sharp, urgent tone echoed through the corridors of the Soul's Pride. She quickly dressed and rushed to the bridge, where she found the crew already at their stations. Captain Dongwoo was standing at the central command position, reading reports from his officers. He looked calm despite the alarms. What is the situation? Yoonji asked. Emergency beacon from the Keldon science vessel Eternal Seeker, Dongwoo replied. They are in distress in the Helios Nebula, approximately 6 hours from our current position. Yoonji knew about the Helios Nebula. It was a dangerous region of space filled with energy storms and radiation. The nebula interfered with sensors and communications. Many ships avoided it completely. What type of distress? Multiple system failures, Navigation Officer Subin reported from her station. Their message was broken and unclear, but it sounds like their main power is failing. On the main display, Yunji could see other ships in the area. A Vorthak cruiser, a Thessian explorer, and 2 Draknari freight ships. All of them were closer to the Eternal Seeker than the Soul's Pride. "Are the other ships responding?" she asked. "They are declining the rescue mission," Dongwu said grimly. The communication system crackled to life. The voice of a Vorthak captain came through clearly. "Soul's Pride, this is Captain Zeth of the Swift Current. We cannot assist with this rescue. The Helios Nebula will interfere with our navigation systems. It would be too dangerous for my ship." Another voice joined the conversation. A Thessian captain this time. "This is Captain Lyra of the Star Song. Our sensors are not designed for nebula conditions. We would be flying blind in there. I cannot risk my crew for a ship that was foolish enough to enter such a dangerous area." A third voice from one of the Draknari freight captains. "Our ships are not equipped for rescue operations. We carry cargo, not emergency equipment. We are returning to our scheduled routes." Yunji watched Captain Dongwu's face as he listened to the other captains making excuses. His expression did not change, but she could see determination in his eyes. "All stations, prepare for emergency rescue operations," he announced to his crew. "Captain," Yunji said quietly, "the other ships have valid points. The Helios Nebula is extremely dangerous. Your ship will face the same problems they mentioned." "Yes," Dongwu agreed. "Our sensors will be affected. Our navigation will be compromised. Our communications will be limited. It will be dangerous and difficult." "Then why are you going in?" Dongwu looked at her with surprise. "Because people need help, Commander. That is what ships are for. Not just to carry cargo or show off advanced technology. They are for helping people when they need it most." He turned to his crew. "HFY, what is our status for extended operations in an energy storm environment?" "All backup systems are ready," the chief engineer reported. "I have prepared manual overrides for all critical functions. If the computers fail, we can operate everything by hand. Subin, navigation options?" "Manual stellar navigation is prepared," the young officer replied. "I have calculated multiple route options using visual reference points. If our sensors fail completely, I can still get us in and out of the nebula." "Young Su, medical readiness?" "Emergency medical bay is fully prepared," the doctor announced. "Supplies for radiation treatment, trauma surgery, and life support failure. Assuming multiple casualties and possibly severe injuries. Minho, can you fly the ship if all our computer assistance fails?" The scarred pilot smiled grimly. "Captain, I flew ships before computers were invented." "Well, almost. If we have manual control, I can fly us anywhere." Yunji watched this exchange with growing amazement. The crew was not just preparing for a rescue mission. They were preparing for every possible way the mission could go wrong. They expected their equipment to fail and had planned for it. "How long have you been preparing for this type of emergency?" she asked. "We practice emergency scenarios every month," Dongwu explained. "Different types of failures, different crisis situations. The crew needs to know what to do when everything goes wrong at once." "But you did not know this specific emergency would happen?" "No, but we knew some emergency would happen eventually. So we prepared for as many possibilities as we could think of." The Soul's Pride changed course toward the Helios Nebula. As they flew, Hyunji could see the crew making final preparations. Everyone moved with practiced efficiency. No panic, no confusion, no wasted motion. Chief Engineer HFY was checking every backup system personally. She did not trust the computer reports. She looked at each component with her own eyes. Dr. Young-soo was preparing the medical bay for casualties they had not even found yet. He arranged surgical tools, set up radiation treatment equipment, and prepared beds for injured people. Subin was plotting their course using 3 different methods: computer navigation, stellar positioning, and manual calculations. If one method failed, she would have 2 others ready. Minho was testing the manual flight controls. Most pilots never used these controls because the computers were much more accurate. But Minho wanted to be sure he could fly the ship even if every computer on board failed. As they approached the edge of the nebula, the other ships moved away. The Vorthak cruiser was already jumping to hyperspace. The Thessian explorer was setting course for the nearest station. The Draknari freighters had disappeared completely. "Are you having second thoughts, Captain?" Yunji asked. "No," Dongwu replied firmly. "This is what we trained for. This is why we prepare so carefully, so when people need help we can actually help them." The Soul's Pride entered the Helios Nebula. Immediately the main screens began showing interference. The computer displays flickered and showed error messages. The communication system filled with static, but the crew did not panic. They had expected this. Switching to backup sensors, Subin announced calmly. Manual navigation online. Computer control compromised, reported HFY. Activating manual overrides. Communication system severely limited, said the communication officer. Short range only. Medical bay ready for any casualties, Dr. Youngsu confirmed. Captain Dongwu nodded to his pilot. Minho, take us in. Yes, sir. Flying manual from here. Yunji felt the ship change as Minho took direct control. The movement became less smooth, more deliberate. But they were still flying, still heading deeper into the dangerous nebula to help people who needed rescue. For the first time in her career as a ship inspector, Yunji was not just evaluating a vessel. She was watching heroes at work. The Soul's Pride flew deeper into the energy storms of the Helios Nebula. Behind them, the safe, empty space where other ships had refused to go. Ahead of them, somewhere in the swirling clouds of radiation and interference, people were waiting to be saved. And these humans were going to save them, no matter what it cost. The Soul's Pride flew through the Helios Nebula like a blind person walking through a dark room. The energy storms twisted around the ship, making the hull creak and groan. Lightning flashed outside the windows, but it was not normal lightning. It was pure energy that could fry electronic systems instantly. Yunji stood on the bridge and watched the human crew work. She had inspected hundreds of ships, but she had never seen anything like this. Most crews would be panicking by now. Most captains would be turning around and heading for safety. But these humans acted like flying through deadly energy storms was just another day at work. Sensors are completely blind, Navigation Officer Subin reported. But I have visual contact with the nebula boundaries. Manual plotting is working. Main engines down to 80% efficiency. Chief Engineer HFY called from the engine room through the communication system. Energy interference is affecting the power distribution. Switching to backup power routing. Life support system stable, Dr. Youngsu added. Radiation levels are high but manageable. No immediate danger to crew health. Captain Dongwu stood at the center of the bridge, calm and focused. Minho, how is the manual flight control? Ship is responding well, Captain, the pilot replied. His hands moved constantly over the controls, making tiny adjustments to keep them on course. The energy storms are trying to push us around, but she is staying where I point her. Yunji noticed something remarkable. Every crew member knew exactly what to do when their advanced equipment failed. They did not stand around waiting for someone else to fix the problem. They immediately switched to backup methods. Subin was navigating using visual landmarks and mathematical calculations she did by hand. No computers, just her knowledge and experience. HFY was monitoring the engines by watching physical gauges and listening to the sound the motors made. She could tell if something was wrong just by how the engine room felt. Minho was flying the ship using manual controls that most pilots never even learned to use. His hands and feet worked the controls like he was playing a musical instrument. How long did it take to train your crew to work like this? Hyunji asked the captain. Years, Dongwu replied. We start with computer-assisted training, then gradually reduce the computer assistance until the crew can do everything manually. It takes much longer than standard training, but it produces people who can work under any conditions. Why do other species not train their crews this way? Because it is expensive and time-consuming. And most of the time the advanced equipment works perfectly. But we learned that perfect equipment is useless if you do not know what to do when it fails. The ship shook as another energy storm passed over them. The lights flickered, and several displays went completely dark. But the crew kept working without missing a beat. Contact ahead, Subin announced. Visual identification of a ship at coordinates Mark 74. On the main screen they could see the Eternal Seeker. The Keldon science vessel was drifting helplessly in the middle of an energy storm. Its hull was scorched and damaged. Several sections looked like they had been hit by lightning strikes. The ship appears to be powerless, Minho reported. No engine activity, no maneuvering. They are just floating. HFY, can we get close enough for docking? Dongwu asked. It will be dangerous, the chief engineer replied. The energy storms around their ship are very intense. Our shields will be under maximum stress, but can we do it? Yes, Captain. But we will have to work fast. Our shields cannot take that kind of punishment for very long. Dongwu turned to his communication officer. Try to contact the Eternal Seeker. The officer worked at his controls for several minutes. Finally, he shook his head. No response, Captain. Their communication system appears to be completely dead. Visual signals? I will try. The communication officer used the ship's external lights to send messages in the old visual code that all spacers learned. Short flashes, long flashes, patterns that meant specific words. After a few minutes, lights began flashing back from the Eternal Seeker. They are responding, Captain. 43 crew members aboard. Multiple injuries. Main power is completely dead. Life support is failing. They estimate less than 2 hours of air remaining. Dr. Young-Soo, are you ready for 43 casualties? Ready, Captain. Medical bay is prepared for multiple trauma cases and radiation poisoning. Min-Ho, bring us alongside for emergency docking. What happened next was like watching a master artist at work. Min-Ho guided the Soul's Pride through the swirling energy storms with perfect precision. The ship shook and bucked as electricity arced around the hull, but the pilot kept them moving steadily toward the disabled Keldon vessel. Chief Engineer HFY monitored every system on the ship, calling out warnings and making adjustments as the energy storms tried to overload their equipment. Shield generators at 90% capacity, hull temperature rising, backup cooling systems online. Su-Bin calculated their approach path using nothing but her eyes and her knowledge of orbital mechanics. Recommend approach angle 37 degrees. That should minimize our exposure to the worst energy concentrations. Even Dr. Young-Soo was helping, monitoring the crew for signs of radiation exposure and preparing treatments for the Keldon survivors they had not even rescued yet. The docking was the most dangerous part. Min-Ho had to bring 2 ships together in the middle of an energy storm, while both vessels were being buffeted by electrical discharges. One small mistake could destroy both ships, but he did it perfectly. The Soul's Pride connected with the Eternal Seeker with barely a bump. Docking successful, he reported. Both ships are secure. Excellent work, everyone, Captain Dongwoo said. Now let's get those people out of there. The rescue operation took an hour and 15 minutes. The human crew worked with incredible efficiency. They carried unconscious Keldons through the docking tube. They provided emergency medical treatment to the injured. They helped the survivors get settled in temporary quarters. Dr. Young-Soo treated radiation poisoning, electrical burns, and injuries from equipment failures. His medical bay became a small hospital as he worked to save lives. Chief Engineer HFY rigged temporary life support for the extra people on board. The Soul's Pride was not designed to carry 43 additional passengers, but she made it work. Captain Dongwoo coordinated everything, making sure no detail was overlooked. He personally checked on every survivor, making sure they had what they needed. And through it all, the ship's systems held together. The shields protected them from the energy storms. The engines kept running despite the electrical interference. The life support provided air and heat for everyone on board. When the last Keldon survivor was safely aboard, Captain Dongwoo gave the order to leave the nebula. Min-Ho, get us out of here. Emergency speed. Yes, sir. Heading for clear space. The Soul's Pride pulled away from the dead Eternal Seeker and flew back through the energy storms toward safety. The trip out was faster than the trip in, but just as dangerous. The storm seemed stronger now, as if the nebula was angry that they had taken away its victims. But the human crew handled it all with the same calm competence they had shown throughout the rescue. When the ship finally emerged from the Helios Nebula into clear space, Hyunji felt like she had witnessed something extraordinary. Captain, she said, what you and your crew just did was remarkable. We did our job, Commander, Dongwoo replied simply. This is why we train so hard. This is why we prepare for everything, so when people need help, we can actually help them. Hyunji looked around the bridge at the human crew. They were tired but satisfied. They had risked their lives to save people they had never met. They had succeeded where other, more advanced ships had failed. And they acted like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. For the first time in her career, Hyunji was beginning to understand what true excellence looked like. 3 days later, Hyunji sat in her temporary office aboard Nexus Station. The rescue of the Eternal Seeker was already becoming famous throughout the galaxy. News services were calling it a miracle. The Keldon government was preparing to give medals to the crew of the Soul's Pride. But Hyunji was not thinking about fame or medals. She was thinking about her evaluation report. For the first time in 12 years of inspecting ships, She did not know what to write. Her tablet sat on the desk in front of her, the screen mostly blank. She had started the report 6 times and deleted it 6 times. How do you evaluate a ship that had changed everything you thought you knew about engineering? The Soul's Pride was not the fastest ship she had inspected. It was not the strongest or the most beautiful or the most advanced. By the standards she had always used, it should have received a failing grade. The technology was ordinary. The design was simple. The weapons were standard Federation issue. But it had done something that no other ship had been able to do. It had gone into the Helios Nebula when advanced ships with superior technology had turned away. It had rescued 43 people when other captains had made excuses. It had succeeded where ships with better equipment had failed. Why? A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Yunji looked up to see Captain Dongwu standing in the doorway. He was holding 2 cups of something that smelled like earth coffee. "Commander," he said with his usual polite smile, "I thought you might be working late. Chief Engineer Heiwan wanted me to give you this." He set one of the cups on her desk and handed her a small device. It looked like it had been built from spare parts. Different pieces of metal held together with simple brackets. Wires ran between components that had obviously come from different manufacturers. "What is it?" Yunji asked, turning the device over in her hands. "A sensor array," Dongwu explained. Heiwan built it during the rescue mission. Our regular sensors could not penetrate the energy storms in the nebula, so she made this from parts she found in the spare equipment locker. Yunji examined the device more closely. It was ugly. No other word could describe it. The components did not match. The wiring was visible. The whole thing looked like it might fall apart if handled roughly. But as she studied it, she began to see the genius in its construction. Every component served multiple purposes. The power supply was also a signal amplifier. The display screen was also a calculation unit. The antenna was also a structural support. It was not elegant, but it was brilliant. "This worked in the nebula?" she asked. "Better than our original sensors," Dongwu confirmed. Heiwan designed it specifically for high-interference environments. "It is not pretty, but it saved lives." Yunji set the device on her desk next to her tablet. The contrast was striking. The tablet was sleek and beautiful, with smooth surfaces and perfect proportions. The sensor array was rough and practical, built for function rather than appearance. "Captain," she said slowly, "I have been writing evaluation reports for 12 years. I have inspected over 300 ships. I thought I understood what makes a ship excellent. And now I realize I was measuring the wrong things." She picked up the sensor array again. "I was looking for perfection. Advanced technology, elegant design, superior performance. But you have shown me something more important." Dongwu sat down in the chair across from her desk. "What is that, Commander?" "Reliability. Not the kind of reliability that comes from perfect manufacturing, but the kind that comes from perfect preparation. Your ship is not excellent because it never fails. It is excellent because when it does fail, you are ready." "That is the human way," Dongwu agreed. "We assume our technology will break down at the worst possible moment. So we prepare for that moment. But it is more than that." Yunji was beginning to understand something that had been bothering her for days. Other species build ships to avoid problems. You build ships to solve problems that have not happened yet. Yes, we call it defensive engineering. Instead of making systems that cannot fail, we make systems that can fail safely. Instead of training crews to follow procedures, we train crews to think when procedures do not work. Yunji thought about all the ships she had inspected. The Vorthak cruisers with their incredible speed and fragile hulls. The Keldon battleships with their massive armor and clumsy handling. The Thessian explorers with their beautiful design and limited functionality. All of them were built to do one thing very well. But when circumstances changed, when the unexpected happened, when systems failed, they became helpless. "You train your people to expect failure," she said. "We train our people to overcome failure," Dongwu corrected. "There is a difference. Expecting failure makes you pessimistic. Overcoming failure makes you prepared. And that is why you succeeded in the nebula when the other ships could not even try." The other ships were designed to work perfectly under normal conditions. But the nebula was not normal conditions. Our ship was designed to work adequately under any conditions. Yunji looked at her tablet again. Then she looked at the jury-rigged sensor array. Finally, she began to type. "What are you writing?" Dongwu asked. "A new kind of evaluation report," she replied. "One that measures the right things." She wrote about reliability that came from preparation rather than perfection. She wrote about crews who could think instead of just following orders. She wrote about engineering that assumed failure and planned to overcome it. She wrote about a ship that was not the best at anything, but was good enough at everything. A ship that could go anywhere and do anything because its crew knew how to adapt when their equipment let them down. She wrote about humans who had taught her that true excellence was not about having the best tools, but about knowing what to do when those tools broke. When she finished, Dongwu read the report over her shoulder. "You are giving us a perfect score," he said with surprise. "Yes. For the first time in my career, I am recommending a ship for Class A certification without any reservations, even though our technology is not the most advanced, because your approach is more advanced than anyone else's technology." Yunji saved the report and closed her tablet. "Captain, I have a question for you." "Of course, Commander, your crew is remarkable. Your ship is reliable, your methods work. But I noticed something during the rescue mission. Your people were not just competent, they were happy. They enjoyed their work even under dangerous conditions." "How do you achieve that?" Dongwu smiled. "Because we trust each other, Commander. When you know that every person on your ship is prepared for anything, when you know that everyone will do their job no matter what happens, when you know that no one will give up when things get difficult, then you can relax and enjoy the work. Even dangerous work? Especially dangerous work. Danger is only terrifying when you are not prepared for it. When you have trained for every possibility, when you have backup plans for your backup plans, when your crew knows how to handle any emergency, then danger becomes just another problem to solve." Unji thought about this. She had inspected so many ships where the crews were tense and worried. Officers who did not trust their equipment. Engineers who did not trust their officers. Captains who did not trust their crews. But on the soul's pride, everyone trusted everyone else. Not because they were perfect, but because they were all prepared for imperfection. "Commander," Dongwu said, standing up to leave, "the crew wanted me to ask you something." "What is it?" "We heard that you are looking for a new assignment. We wondered if you might be interested in joining the human fleet." Yunji looked at him in surprise. "You want me to work for humans?" "We want you to work with humans. Your knowledge and experience combined with our methods and philosophy. We think you could help us build even better ships. But I am not human. Neither is Minho originally. He was Draknari before he joined us. Dr. Youngsu used to work for the Thessian Medical Service. Chief Engineer Hai Wan learned her trade in the Keldon shipyards. We are not just a human crew, Commander. We are a crew that has learned to work the human way." Yunji considered this offer. She had spent 12 years looking for ships that met her standards. Now she had found people who had taught her what standards should really be. "I would be honored to join your crew, Captain." "Excellent. We will submit the paperwork immediately." After Dongwu left, Yunji sat alone in her office for a few more minutes. She looked out the window at the ships in the docking bay. Tomorrow she would begin her new assignment. She would help humans build ships that were ready for anything. Ships that were not perfect, but were perfectly prepared. Ships that could succeed when perfection failed. For the first time in her career, she was excited about going to work. She picked up the jury-rigged sensor array one more time. It was still ugly. It was still obviously made from spare parts. But it worked when advanced equipment failed. Sometimes she thought the best solution was not the most elegant solution. Sometimes the best solution was the one that worked when nothing else would. That was the human way. And now it was her way too. Outside her window, the Soul's Pride sat in its docking berth ready for the next mission. Ready for whatever challenges space might bring. Ready for anything.